This is Jonathan Navitua here with the Danville Bicentennial Project. It is 5/22/24, and I'm here with Melody Warnock, right? Did I pronounce that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. For the record, do I have permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Sweet. And I know I introduced you, but could you just state your name and your age?
Melody Warnock. I am 61 years old.
All right. And so, where and when were you born?
I was born in Hendricks County Hospital in 1962.
Oh, okay. Um, so you're from the area, correct?
Yes.
All right. So what was it like growing up here? I know that's a broad question, but
Well, Danville was a really sweet place to grow up. Um, my parents lived across the street from Danville South Elementary, which is now the Government Center, but that used to be a school. Um, so handy to go places. Um, my mom did not drive, and so we used to walk, and there used to be a lot of things downtown that we could go to. And sometimes that they would send, she would send me on errands, and it was close enough that I could go by myself and pick things up, and everybody felt safe. Um, for a while, when I was little, Indianapolis had a bus line that ran to Danville. It stopped at the square to pick up people, so some people commuted via the bus and worked downtown. It was nice to be here when I was in high school once I got my license, because it was close enough to Indianapolis that you could run in and do stuff with your friends. And we used to like zip up to Lafayette Square Mall when it was safe to do so and go to the show or go shopping. We'd go downtown. We'd go on the east side. Um, so we were close enough to go do stuff, but then also it's still in a pretty safe rural community of Danville with, when I was a kid, we had a lot of farms around. In fact, my dad hauled livestock. That's what he did for a living. He hauled livestock and grain, for the farmers. So he'd take things to the Indianapolis stockyards or to the auctions or to like the different locker plants that are close by for processing of animals. At fair time, he would take fair animals to and from the fair, but also after they had the fair auction, and they one of the big packing plants in Anderson would buy like hogs that were 4-H hogs,
hmm.
and Dad would take those up there, for them to deal with and process. So I just felt like it was a really, really great place to grow up, because it was um, a small, nice community, but like I said, but close enough that you could go do fun stuff too. I had a real adjustment when I moved away for a while, to a different farming community in northern Indiana, but it was just the farming community, and it was like you had to drive an hour to get to anything else, any shopping or movie theaters or anything like that. So it kind of helped me appreciate growing up in Danville, I think, even more at that point.
You mentioned uh, that you would go elsewhere to do some fun things. What was there for fun around here when you were younger?
Well, excuse me, we like to like go to Ellis Park and go on the trails. There were more trails then because there weren't quite so many houses. So you actually could climb around, and it was more wooded. So that was a little bit bigger area to explore than it is now. You kind of run into houses pretty quick. Um, but we would do that. Of course, the haunted bridge in Danville, that was a cool thing to go. You could go. I remember one year in high school, I don't know if I should admit this or not, but some friends and we went to we went out to the bridge, and it's like a catacomb because you can go through it. I mean, it's like not exactly hollow, but kind of like hollow in the middle. So you can go into it and go under, but you can also go on top. And so while we were there, now we of course didn't do this, but some other kids that were there, because this was around Halloween, had made, like a stuffed person. And as cars would go under the bridge, they'd throw it off. They had it on a big rope, but they kept like, now I look back and think, oh my gosh, we could have caused somebody to have an accident or a heart attack, or they could have, but
Right.
Um, Also, Blanton Woods was another place that there were some fun things you could do out there. You could hang out, around campfire, um, do things like that. There wasn't. We had the Royal. Um, And the people who owned it at one point, Earhart's lived up the street from my mom and dad. Um, so, we did get to go see some movies there. It wasn't a big theater, but, there'd be some stuff that would come there.
All right. Nice little things to get you into trouble.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. The town itself, can you describe what the town looked like at the time?
Sure. Well, like I said, so I lived on Washington Street, right across from the elementary school, and from South Elementary. And so if you went downtown, there used to be where, right by the Historical Society, where that is. Well, I can remember when that actually was the jail. Um, but anyway, right before that is a parking lot. That used to be a church. That was a Baptist church. And in fact, it was a big deal. My mom and dad would let me ride my bike, but at each age and stage, you have different places you can ride to. You can only go this far. And so it was a big deal when I got to ride all the way from my house up to the Baptist church, and then I'd turn around and come back down. Anyway, but so that was there, and then what used to be the historical museum. Then as you went around the square, there used to be a hardware store where Dips is. And I always thought it was really cool to go in there. It was always kind of dark. And I feel like they had a wood floor, so it like made noise. You know how that does when you walk in. And they had metal like bins so that you could get screws and nails. They were in the bin and you get a bag. So sometimes my dad would be working on something, building something, and he'd need more nails or something. And he'd give me, change, believe it or not. And I'd get to walk to the hardware store and ask them for my dad needs, whatever, and they'd give me a little brown paper bag of nails, and I'd take them back down to him. So anyway, that was there. There were still lots of lawyers' offices. Then there was the Royal. There were some clothing stores that were on the square. Um, one of my favorite. There was Beeson's and there was Mingles, um, which is where I think like the Chamber of Commerce is now. Um, there were there were some bars on three sides. There were two banks that were on the square. One of them is a lawyer's office. It's on the corner of Washington and 36. And then State Bank was on the opposite side of the square. There was Chalfant's. The Chalfant family had a plumbing business, and their office go in was on the square. There was a little restaurant called the Coffee Cup. It was a little diner thing that was on, yeah, that was on the square. There was a drugstore, and there was Danner's Five and Dime, where you could go and find all kinds of stuff. I think of it like a precursor to Walmart. They didn't have groceries, but it was one of those places where you could go in and they had a big variety of different things. Um, that was where Fast Tracks is now.
I see, I see. That's a lot of changes, huh?
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. I I want to ask you about some of the town's landmarks and your
hmm
experience with them. Do you have any experience with some of these bigger landmarks?
So, like what?
Well, let's see. There's, of course, people talk about the courthouse, our library, I would consider probably a
hmm
landmark. Things like that, maybe. What do you consider some of our landmarks? Let's go with that first.
Well, I would say, yeah, the courthouse, because the courthouse you used to be able to walk in. Yeah, now it's like secured, and I think you can only go in one door. Um, but it used to all be open, and honestly, as a kid, I remember sometimes we'd like zip in there just because it was cool. Like in the summer when it'd be really hot, you know, you'd go in there. And I also remember it's got like marble stairs. I remember going there. I had to take something for my mom or dad, and then coming down the stairs, and I slipped, and fell down a few stairs, and somebody that knew my parents saw me, and they, came rushing over, and I was so embarrassed. It's like, but but there used to be, they used to have special events on the courthouse lawn too. So I I don't know what it was about. I mean, I don't know like who sponsored it or why they had it. I I remember one time they had Fez Parker that played Daniel Boone on TV. For some reason, I don't know if he was like in Indianapolis and somehow they got him to come out to Danville. But anyway, he did a little thing and there's this whole crowd of people from Danville, and he like gave a little talk and whatever. We got to see a Hollywood star. Um, and the library was definitely one of my favorite places to come to because, again, I could walk. It was close enough I could walk and come and get books. And again, it would be a place that was cool in the summer, so it was fun to come hang out here because it was always.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, so we talked about some of these landmarks. How would you say they've changed over time? Like I know you mentioned that the courthouse obviously is more secured. What about the library? How has
Right.
that shifted?
Well, it's gotten, I mean, with the expansion of the library, it's gotten different. Like when I was a kid, it was just the old part, the first part of it, and everybody came and went from the Carnegie door. Um, when my daughters were small, we lived in Danville for a while, and one of them upstairs was when I was little, that was the adult department. And then when my oldest was little, that was the children's department was upstairs. But they would have events. Like I remember them doing summer reading and they had some stuff inside, but then they had a whole bunch of I remember them doing some things outside because there was still a lawn and green area which has really kind of disappeared as the building's gotten bigger. Any kind of parking or lawn area has kind of gotten taken up by the structure, but that just kind of had to be.
Could you, since you've spent some time in the library, could you describe what it looked like when you first like when you were younger? Do you remember that?
Well, I always thought that the library looked a lot like the courthouse, kind of that same, because I imagine they were probably built in the same style, if you know what I mean. Um, and again, like the children's part was downstairs, and you went in, and I swear there was like stone or marble on like stairs or floor because it was always really, really cool, you know? Um, and then there was no elevator at that time, so if you came upstairs, you had to use the stairs. Um, I, the the atmosphere is much different. You know, you were quiet wherever you were in the library, and always being very careful and whatever, and not. I love to read, and I read a lot, and I read and and so because I read a lot, I think that made me a better reader, so I could read above my grade level. But the librarians didn't always welcome me to come upstairs and look at stuff. I think they're like, ah, yeah, they weren't very friendly, shall we say? I'm sure they were just wanting to keep the books nice and you know.
Yeah. All right, all right. So let's see. Uh, Landmarks. Mhm.
Well, I don't know if you. I was gonna say. I think one of the things, and this makes me sad. I will say this makes me sad. So Danville has the new edition that's going out, Miles Farms, that's going out west of town across from the high school. Um, the man that used to own that, Charlie Miles, was my family knew him forever. My dad worked, did some stuff for him. My brother worked for him in high school and helped him take care. He had horses. He had race horses, but they're sulky horses. Um, and so my brother worked for him in high school, like I said. But Charlie and my dad were always good friends. And then um, much later in life, he still had horses that he was racing on the circuit, and my dad took care of his horses for him. Um, and so I just remember that being this beautiful, you know, horse farm with just a neat green, whatever. And it's very hard to see it change to becoming this housing addition. And I feel like he would not have really been in favor of that at all. My daughters and I joke about it, those people buy houses and they may have somebody haunting them because I don't think he would have exactly been up for that expansion. But also to think, so if you're thinking of like a horse farm, how, and basically it was just farms, So even though you got to the high school, I mean, the high school really was the edge of town. There wasn't, even across from it, was not developed, I guess. And that's going to be a major change that's going to happen here when you put all those houses up, and we're losing all the farmland. You could drive, I mean, you didn't have to drive very far out of town in any direction. Even if you went between Danville and Avon, there were still farms, and there would be livestock, that you could see and stuff. And now you kind of have to, you got to drive for a while and be searching to get to see.
So a lot of these farms you said are disappearing. Were they mostly like were they larger farms or were they kind of family farms?
Family farms. And some of them it would be like multiple family members,
Uh,
Um, yeah.
and were they? You mentioned a lot of livestock. In the time I've been here, I've only seen basically like a lot just corn and stuff. Has that also changed a lot? Like, have you noticed what we grow?
Um, I mean, a lot of the farms used to have, it's always been wheat, soybeans, and corn have been the big crops in the area. And they might do that. And in addition, they would raise hogs or they would raise cattle or they would have dairy. Some of them have dairy farms and then still had crops. Um, Being in the livestock business has just become too cost, it's too cost prohibitive for farms, so they really started going down. Um, I mean, my dad basically, when he retired, it was kind of by choice, but also kind of because there wasn't that demand anymore. I mean, he used to drive a stock truck with animals, to be sold, and he would drive several times a week up to Indianapolis, and then that just kept, like decreasing because the demand wasn't that great, and because they were doing more of the consignment where they raise them, you know, in the great big barn, and like hogs particularly, they don't ever get out of that. I mean, they're born there, they they feed them out, and then they ship them to be processed. So
Makes sense. Okay, that's interesting. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and shift gears and ask about the schools. What was schooling like at that time? Because I know the schools have changed
mhm.
quite a bit.
So when so I'm thinking about, I'm trying to remember. I think my brother, but I don't really yeah, no, he would have. Okay. My brother would have graduated South Elementary at one point, was first through 12th grade. So he would have graduated from there. My brother was 18 years older than I am. So there's kind of that span. My sister was 12 years older. When she graduated, she was the first graduating class out of um, what's at one point it was the high school, at one point it was the middle school, then now it's the Danville Health Club. It's part of the old Hargrave Hall from Central Normal College. Okay, at one point in time, that was one of the schools. When I started, we had North Elementary where it is, South was across the street from my mom and dad's, and we went there fourth through sixth grade, and then seventh and eighth grade was over where the health club thing is now, and then the high school, was out where it is. So, I mean, while there's a difference in age between my brother and sister and I, you can also, that kind of shows how they kept adding schools, as the town was growing.
Makes sense. And were your classes fairly? What was like the class size and stuff?
Around, I think we had around 140-ish, because when by the time I was going through school, it was Danville and New Winchester had consolidated. It was part of our school. I think my brother and sister's classes were probably smaller because I think it was just Danville at that point.
All right, all right. So you mentioned that Hargrave Hall and whatnot was used for the school. Did you get to use them?
Yeah, we had when I was in middle school, the social studies classes were on the second floor of Hargrave Hall. I don't remember what was on the first floor, but in the basement, that was where the girls' PE gym was in the basement of Hargrave Hall. Because I remember we'd be down in this room that had no windows and doing our gym, doing our fun gym stuff. It was a great place to play volleyball, or not volleyball, dodgeball, because you didn't have to worry about windows, so you could throw it to hit off that back wall and get people.
um, Hargrave Hall has kind of a reputation of being haunted. Have you ever had any stories or experiences with that?
I have not personally, but yes, I have heard that. Um, well, I think one of the other things, I mean, I don't think we thought about it so much. And I think they played that up because at one point in time they would do like a Halloween, you know, you could go through, like they made a haunted house, and people could go through it. I just think of the other thing that, like, when I was in middle school, we also had gym classes. We'd walk down to Ellis Park to do some of our gym class activities. So we ran the track and at that time it was still a cinder track. Let me tell you, cinder track is not fun if you ever fall. That is painful. But we used the tennis courts where the pickleball is now. Used to all be tennis courts. They used to have baseball diamonds over on the one side, and like we did baseball and softball. We did all that as our gym class in the park, which is kind of
It's kind of nice.
yeah, yeah. It was very handy.
Um, so shifting gears again a little bit, I know it is kind of everywhere. So could you tell me about some of these like celebrations or events that happened within Danville while you were growing up?
Well, I think like my one of my favorite events that was part of Danville, Hendricks County was the fair. You know, that was always, I loved that week. It was a great time. And, I mean, basically I'd get dropped off in the morning and, find a ride home at night or get picked up at night. Just had fun doing stuff at the fair. And the fairgrounds used to be, I mean, that has changed too, because it used to be, um, there were kind of where the jail is now. And part of it was in the armory. They'd have part of the exhibits over there in the armory. So you'd walk over there.
Well, what was the fair like at that time? 'Cause I'm sure that's changed a little bit.
Well, going back to where we talked about the animals and stuff too. Yeah, because there used to be, I mean, they had two or three barns just for the cattle, at least. And there was, a whole barn that was nothing but pigs. And then there'd be, you know,
So would they show them?
mm-hmm, yeah, yeah. And that was one of the things I liked too, because some of the farmers that had kids that were in 4-H, like I'm a town kid, so I didn't get to have an animal, but I always wanted an animal. But since my dad hauled livestock, he would help haul kids' 4-H animals to the fair. And sometimes, if I was lucky, they'd let me help them, like load them and unload them, so I could pretend. That was the closest I ever got to having an animal. But yeah.
Did they have any particular rides or drinks? Well, not drinks, but food that was associated with the fair.
Well, there was always a section that had the carnival, and your I don't know your usual fair food, shakes and um, lemonade and stuff. And there used to be, um, once a year, and I'm thinking it was in the summer basically, they used to shut down part of the square and they'd have a carnival on the square for like 2 or 3 nights, which was always fun
Really?
because again, I was close enough. I could walk up there, I could meet friends, whatever, and you get so one night you get cotton candy, one night you get, your candied apple. you know, you have to spread out those sweets. And but yeah, but they used to close off.
Was it for any particular reason, or was it just like it was Carnival Week?
Yeah, that was just like the carnival time. So and then they had like a um, like a fair on the square where they would use, kind of like the farmers market where they kind of utilize three sides. They would do that. They used to shut down for homecoming in the fall. They would shut down 36 and the parade. We would, because I was in the marching band, we would march on 36 and go around the square and then go out to the high school. I mean, that was part of the parade route. It started at South Elementary, that was always a fun time of year too. That was, like I said, it would be in the fall for football homecoming, and all the floats would be made out of um, Kleenex flowers,
Mm-hmm.
with the pom poms. And so I mean, we had like a front row seat to watch all that. So as everybody's lining up and getting ready, and people would be running over. Do you have any extra Kleenex? We need, we got a hole in our float or whatever. And then when I got bigger, being in the band and would march it. And my senior year, I got to ride got to ride in a car and do the princess wave, thing. Just whatever. So that, and we did not do the whole throwing candy thing, which is now like the huge tradition of, part of the homecoming parade, and people get bags of candy. We just rode or marched or walked and waved.
What what was homecoming like? What did y'all do for that week? Because I think it's a little bit different everywhere you go.
So, like I said, homecoming week was for the football game, and then there was always a dance after. But that whole week, you'd be making pom poms furiously for the float. So in all the classes, you'd be folding and stapling these flowers. and in some classes, you kind of had to do that on the sly. In some classes, the teachers didn't care and they'd let you, do it. And it would be usually somebody's parents would volunteer their barn, or if they had like a really big shed or a garage or something for building the float on a wagon. And then, on Friday night, they brought it into town, and then, the parade would happen, and you'd all go out to the football game and cheer on the Warriors, you know.
Um, the floats was it just different clubs and organizations, or for like specific?
It was the four classes. So freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors would each have a float. And then you might, like clubs and organizations, might have, like when I was in high school, they might have like a car with their officers or something, and you'd have your princess and the uh, your princesses that were competing to become homecoming queen. They would each be in a car, but it wasn't organizations like outside of school. It was pretty well confined to the high school.
All right, all right. So that's good. That's good. That's interesting. So I'm gonna shift gears a bit. Um, so uh, what kind of over its long history? I'm sure lots of things have happened, but can you tell me about like a tragedy or something that affected Danville?
Well, probably what comes to mind first is, and um, we had, um, a young man that was lost in Vietnam. And I went to school with his niece. She was in my class in school. His name was Terry Hoffman, and he was around my brother's age. So I remember, my brother and his friends talking about it, and then there was a big. Terry was a pilot, and he was shot down, and so then there was a big span of time before his body was returned to his family, and his grandma worked at the school. Worked in the cafeteria. She was a really nice lady, and I remember. I think that was. I mean, I don't know if I was in high school or past that. I can't remember when his remains were brought back home, but that was kind of a sober, event that the whole community felt.
How did the community respond to it?
Oh, everybody was, you know, very patriotic, pulled together. I mean, he was a great young guy, and it was a good really nice family, and I think everyone was happy that he got to come back home.
That makes sense. Um, so outside of your family, what did the community kind of look like? Like the organizations that were active in doing things and whatnot.
Um, well, the JCs, I remember, were a very active group. Um, and they, to do community service projects. Um, I think the Optimist Club, I think, is the ones that sell the Christmas trees at Christmas time out on the west edge of town. And the Boy Scouts ham, that was always a big deal.
Ham?
They have, yeah, they have a weekend where they cook these hams, so outside over the big rotating spit thing, and yeah, you got to go get a Boy Scout ham sandwich. It's like a Danville tradition.
I had never heard that.
Yeah, well, you'll have to check it out.
I will. So okay, that's a pretty active community. Um, were you part of any organizations in town while you were?
I was active in school and things. Not in like I was a Girl Scout, and well, we had the little house, which was where some of our scout meetings used to be, which is kind of down a couple of blocks from the library here. It was again that whole within walking distance thing, so I could walk over there. I don't even know if they still have it at the high school. Like I was in band and drama, and we used to have we produced a literary magazine, of people's poems and short stories and things. Um, and I was in a service organization called Tri High Y, which that's the one. I'm not sure if they still have that anymore. But I had friends when I went to college that were in a group called Sunshine, which was similar. The idea was it was a the girls organization that did service projects. And in Danville, they had Tri High Y, which was the girls, and then the boys was High Y. But then I think my brother was in High Y, but by the time I was in school, I don't think they had that one anymore for the guys.
So what kind of things did Try High Y do at the time?
So, like um, gather. I remember we worked with the JCs one year for collecting money for muscular dystrophy, and we did things to like, help gather food or clothing for if somebody would need it or if an organization could take it. Um, we did like Christmas caroling of the nursing homes and, those kind of things.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So we've touched on some of these, but especially since you're from here, can you tell me any urban legends concerning Danville? Urban legends, folklore, things like that.
Well, like I said, the haunted bridge, which Avon has a haunted bridge too, and I think they kind of have melded over time. But there was the stories there, like you had the guy that fell into the cement. That's then part of the bridge. That so he like haunts the area. um, some different things like that. Trying to think. We I think there used to be some stories of, like maybe ghostly activity in Blanton Woods, but uh, and I remember when I was in high school, and I can't remember which organization it was. I don't know if it was the JCs or if it was another. It was like an adult men's service club, and they put on a haunted house out across from Blanton Woods by one of the churches out there. Has I don't know what it was, some kind of old brick building. Anyway, they made that into this haunted house, and I don't know if they put this on or not, but so I went with some friends and we went through the house, and then you went through the house and it was kind of in this wooded area, and you came out the other side and then you had to like walk back to your cars, whatever. So we went through and we'd gotten our scare and whatever, and we're kind of talking about it and laugh, but like feeling like it's all over as we're walking back through the woods and we hear something, we look behind us and there's a guy on horseback, a headless horseman on yeah. Girls can run really fast with the proper motivation. And we never did ask anybody whether, I don't know whether that was like one of our friends that did that or if that was a planned thing, part of their, but mm-hmm. Scary Halloween.
All right, I have just one more question. So, Danville obviously has changed a lot and is continuing to change. How would you like to see Danville change in the next, 200 years or so?
Well, ideally, I mean, I realize every place has to grow, and with growth comes positives and comes negatives sometimes. Um, I think I think Danville for a really, really long time, the town council and the leaders of the area worked, and sometimes to its detriment, to keep it a small community. So it didn't grow as quickly as, say, like Plainfield and Brownsburg, and certainly Avon. Um, but I would hope it would grow in a positive way, but still maintain um, the small town feel, the idea of people caring about each other, looking out for each other, supporting each other. that that would happen. I feel badly. Avon was like our big rival in high school, you know. We hated Avon.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just part of it was kind of a requirement. Um, but I do feel like that community is at a real disadvantage because it doesn't have any center and it's just kind of a big sprawl, you know. And so to get a sense of community, I think has to be hard. I hope Danville doesn't become such a big, you know, like a big sprawl like that. It's got a core. I wish it could become more developed around the courthouse again with things while there are businesses and things there. It would be nice if they would be available like in the evenings and on the weekends. And it's great that there's the gallery, but you know, uh, so many of those things are not available for people who work to go to like in the evening or Saturday maybe, but they've got short hours, you know. So to make that more of a thriving business that people could come and go to day and night, I think would be nice. But like I said, keeping the sense of caring would be important. And I'm not saying that, and Danville is definitely not, has never been and never will be perfect, you know. I don't want it to sound too idealized. But I think to hold on to the strengths would be a good thing, not to not to get so big that they can't that people lose their connections. Um, being a teacher, I know that was a real struggle. That became a big struggle for a lot of communities and areas because as schools consolidated, people lost that small connection. And then once you lose that, you lose the sense of community and pride and wanting to support that because, you know, you're not so centralized. So I would hope that our town, as it grows, can be real mindful of that to keep some center going, even if it's at different locations, but to keep that connection.
All right. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for talking with me. And any last thoughts or words you want to share?
I don't think so. Thanks for letting me do this.